When you see some folks from the left and they make it a quote unquote women's rights issue, whether that's AOC, Elizabeth Warren, from your perspective, what do you think the best anecdotes to that are?
Oh my God. I think if this woman wants to be mad about something, she should be mad about the fact that Planned Parenthood's only solution is there's two truths about and when you take the life of another human, when you take the life of your daughter or your son, there's never getting that back, and that pain will be with you.
Would you go as far as to say that the paradigm itself is demonic?
Ruslan.
All right. Jeff, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate you and your story and everything you're doing with Human Coalition. New book, Beauty to Ashes. We're going to be talking about it today. So without any further ado, Jeff Bradford.
Hey, thanks for having me here. It's great to be here in San Diego.
Thanks, man.
That's
Can you pull the mic up just a smidge closer to you? Just take it and just pull it.
All right.
There we go.
That good?
That's fine. So I became excited about your guys' work a couple years ago when a friend of mine, Preston Perry, actually told me about an amazing pro-life organization. He was friends with the gentleman that was your guys', was he like a public, what's the
Yeah, he did a lot of our PR, and he was our vice president of strategic partnerships, Benjamin Watson.
Benjamin Watson,
Yes.
NFL Super Bowl
He's amazing.
winner.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got hip to you guys around then, and then I kept up. I started seeing the work you guys were doing, and I thought, man, there's a lot of really good pro-life organizations out there.
Yes.
What I love about Human Coalition is you guys are kind of bridging the gap between the people who are potentially going to do this terrible act of terminating a baby and connecting them with resources that can help them not make that decision and actually have an alternative path.
Absolutely. You know, when we first started, we're a group of business guys that really saw some major gaps in the pro-life movement. This was, I started almost 15 years ago. I sold my company and started getting involved with that, and really part of the story of the book and how I got involved in the pro-life movement. But we saw a major gap in the market, especially at that time. It still exists largely today, which is we're not seeing the women who are actually planning to abort, those that are headed to the abortion clinics. And so we developed and pioneered, paid search and other ways to reach a woman who is online, Googling for an abortion near them and bring them into a system of care.
So back in the 2010-ish era, that's when you guys started, around there. If a woman is going and she's seeking out an abortion online, she's trying to get information, she would get an ad from you guys, a paid ad that you guys are paying for, to connect her with someone that could redirect that towards a pregnancy resource center.
Yeah, so we would, at that time, we would use those. We want them to click and call us immediately. And then we were connecting them at that point directly with pregnancy resource centers. We had some glitches in that. A lot of the centers were not really equipped and ready. Less than 42% of the calls were actually being answered. So we brought a lot of that in-house and started kind of figuring out how we could test and optimize to save more babies and care for more moms.
Yeah. Well, the pregnancy resource centers over the years have kind of been under attack by, I think it was Elizabeth Warren that was really upset about them.
Absolutely.
And so was the controversy and is there, I guess, an issue that people are saying, well, people are seeking an abortion, but then they're getting an option to not have an abortion, and therefore that's quote unquote deceptive. Is that kind of some of the pushback against the pregnancy resource centers?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. They will say that the pregnancy resource centers are not, medical, or they're not getting the care that they are saying that they're giving, which is by and large not true at all. Women need help. There's a stat that Human Coalition has developed over time. 76% of the women who are planning to abort, those that believe abortion is their only option, 76% of those women will tell us that they would prefer to parent if their circumstances were different.
Really?
So, yes.
Wow.
So that just completely obliterates the narrative of people like Elizabeth Warren, who think that these women want an abortion. They actually don't. They want help and care, and they don't know where to find it. And that's why the internet and the search engine marketing is so important, because women want help, but they don't know where to turn. And so pregnancy centers do a great job of that.
That's so fascinating. So, the downstream effects, it seems like that there's just like a completely different worldview about this specific act, and what is it in there, first of all. If it's a baby, if you want it to be a baby, and if you miscarry, it's a baby, and if you're sad about the miscarriage, it's a baby, but if it's not a baby because you don't want the baby because your circumstances aren't right, then therefore it's not a baby. Like there's a distorted and perverted worldview issue, I think, that's at the core of this. Is that fair from your perspective?
Yeah, it seems that way in a lot of things, doesn't it? That we're all watching two different channels for sure, and there's such a distorted worldview of what a child is. And we certainly believe the lies of 30 years ago when my wife and I were pregnant, and believe that it's a clump of cells. But a lot of that has really moved on to where people admit that it's a child. They just don't value the life in the womb.
It's almost as if taking out the child is viewed as mercy killing.
I think that's a lot. I think a lot of people who see themselves as compassionate believe that's the case. That, hey, I care more about the mom, and I want to be compassionate to her. And therefore, it's okay to take the life of the baby.
Yeah. So when you see some folks from the left, we mentioned Elizabeth Warren, and they make it a quote unquote women's rights issue, whether that's AOC, Elizabeth Warren, and it's basked in a disguise of compassion. From your perspective, what do you think the best anecdotes to that are to combat that paradigm? Because it sounds good on the surface, a woman's actualization, to have a career and to be able to do what she wants with her body. What do you think the best way to combat that in terms of, I guess, a polemics perspective, like a argument perspective?
I think it's stories from real moms. It's hearing real life stories. I wish Elizabeth Warren could meet the moms that believe that abortion is their only option when they call us. And when you really get underneath that, it's because they don't know where to turn. They don't know that there's help available. They see these mountains in front of them, and the world tells them, you can't be a mom. You can't flourish. You'll lose your job. You'll never, become something if you have this child. And that's what they hear from Elizabeth Warren and the politicians. But they should meet the mom and see that baby. The most rewarding thing that I've ever been a part of is seeing a baby being held by her mother saying, I can't believe that I almost took the life of my child. And that is such an amazing moment. I wish Elizabeth Warren could hear the heartbeat of that child. I wish she could see that mom and having received help. So one of the things that we did back in 2013, when we have a mantra, if we can't measure it, we won't do it. So we started looking at what's really underneath the reasons why women feel that abortion is their only option. Obviously, the culture's told them that, but also things like housing, education, employment, childcare. These are real reasons. These are very difficult circumstances, and this is the kind of compassion that we as the pro-life movement, those that believe in life, that we are helping moms through these really difficult situations. And this is why I think we as the movement, as well as the church, have to continue to step in the gap for these moms.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think I want to talk about more, because I have some, I want to say internal critiques within my own side that I want to get to with you. But is it fair to say that what's happening from a cultural standpoint around this issue specifically, would you go as far as to say that the paradigm itself is demonic?
I don't know of any other way to understand what's going on besides understand that it is a spiritual battle, that we are fighting against principalities. I don't know why else there's so much vitriol in the culture about killing a child, and why that is so important to the pro-abortion side, that we must kill these children in order. I think it is a spiritual issue for sure. And so we've got to treat it as such.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to play this clip for you, and I want to come back to your story. Just this past week, we saw a situation. If you want to grab those headphones, and I haven't reacted to this, but a lot of people have been asking my thoughts on this. There was a woman named Savannah, who I believe works with Live Action, and she was doing a man on the street interview, and it instantly escalated to violence. It starts off as this cordial. I'm not gonna play the beginning of it, but they start very friendly, and she's complimenting each other, and then it instantly turns into something that is violent. And I don't understand what else could be driving this besides some sort of spiritual, demonic paradigm, right? This is Savannah Craven Anto, I think is how you say it. She was doing an interview, and so like the temperature here is so interesting, the way this conversation starts and the way it ends, right? So if I play the beginning of this.
Some interviews today.
I love your skin tone too.
Thank you. Such a good vibe.
Of course.
Well, awesome. So we're asking people's opinion today on
So it starts very, very flattering and complimenting and all that sort of stuff. And then around the 4-minute mark, they get into this idea of adoption, and it quickly escalates into violence.
What are they afraid of?
Women don't know. They don't know what they're exposing their bodies to. A lot of people, especially behind abortion, there's a stigma.
But their abortions are going up. So they used to have this slogan where they said safe, legal, and rare. That's what we want, safe, legal, and rare abortions, until it was exposed that a lot of these facilities were requiring abortion quotas. So the more abortions each facility...
Okay, abortion quotas is crazy.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard of that as well. It's amazing that would be such a thing. But when you're a for-profit business, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Quotas are not unusual.
Yeah.
If you don't have anything against aborting babies, then and you're running a business, then why wouldn't you have quotas?
Is Planned Parenthood for-profit or nonprofit?
Well, they are a nonprofit, but there's a lot of abortion clinics that aren't.
Interesting. That's crazy. Okay.
The more like praise that they would get awards, and so it's really interesting. That doesn't really make it seem like they want safe, legal, and rare abortions.
How many people can you think, or are you gonna assume, would literally abandon their children with no repercussions from the state?
No, it's called safe haven baby boxes. We're at a fire station or hospital. You can leave your baby, and the mother doesn't have to do anything with it. But that's
so she's giving her the facts around safe haven, and the girl is just nodding her head no. It's like you're having information presented to you of like, no, you don't have to do this act. There are other options, and it's just not registering.
No, I think there's such a stronghold, and I think this comes back to these women's experiences or what they've heard from the media that happens that they just parrot back.
Better than killing her baby through abortion, right?
No, ma'am.
It's not better to give your baby up to a family who wants them instead of killing them?
No, ma'am. I've seen so many stories.
I don't know if she meant to say that, but that seems to be the conclusion of the paradigm. It is better to kill this baby than to give it to a family that can raise the baby.
We hear that a lot in our counseling. A woman who is in an unexpected pregnancy that believes that. One, you just think about it. She wants to get rid of it as quickly as possible, and it not to affect her life. So the last thing that she wants to do is be pregnant and then put the baby up for adoption. It's the last thing, and they will literally say, "I'd rather kill my baby than put him up for adoption."
What do you think that is?
I think there's some misunderstanding of what adoption is.
Okay.
I think they look at that as foster care, that they're going into a system and they're unwanted and they're uncared for, and they haven't been really educated on adoption today. I've seen stats where there is many loving parents wanting to adopt as we have abortions every year.
Yeah, I think there's millions of people that are looking to adopt every year.
Right.
And there's different types of adoptions. There's open adoption, closed adoptions. There's all types of different ways that people can go about this.
That's right. And adoption is such a beautiful thing. I mean, especially we as Christians know that we've all been adopted.
Amen.
And it's a beautiful thing. And adoptions, you know, we work with Lifeline Children's Services, and they do an amazing job in those open adoptions where almost the mom gets adopted too by the family. And it's wonderful to see, and it's such a beautiful thing. So you wonder, someone like this, what's her backstory? You know, what's she been exposed to? Why is she this willing to go to this extent to protect her own belief system?
Yeah. Let me play a little bit more of this.
And countless, literally, like countless stories.
What happens in an abortion?
They literally suck the life out of you. They're gonna take the whole baby out, and as they should, because I shouldn't be a taxpayer paying child support and food stamps and WIC. But
you should be a taxpayer paying for abortions?
Exactly. But
Oh my gosh. I mean, that is just, she says they suck the life out of you. She knows exactly what an abortion is. It's not a clump of cells. She understands that that's a life in there.
Yeah.
That's dark.
It's hard to believe.
as for a woman who didn't want the baby in the first place, that doesn't make sense to me. Don't ever sit here and lock yourself down with a man who already told you he doesn't want to be with you.
I agree with you.
I'm not disagreeing with you either. I understand.
You don't get to kill the baby just because their dad didn't want them.
You can.
Should we kill the kids in foster care?
Why not? Why not? If that
Wow.
Why not? Should we kill the kids in foster care? Why not?
Yeah, it's hard to watch, and but I think this is a belief for lots of people. I think we talked about it earlier. I think they believe they're compassionate, and killing a child has become okay in their world. That you can take a life of a child, and I think we've seen that through the abortion industry.
Yeah.
No longer is it safe and rare. It's celebrating your abortion.
Yeah.
It's celebrating killing a child.
Yep.
that's the case.
We should kill the kids in foster care that aren't wanted.
Who's going to take care of them? I need to know the percentage of people who take children from foster care and abuse them and molest them, who make them like personal slaves.
We should just kill them.
Okay, so that's an interesting point, and I have never looked into data. I don't know if you've ever looked into data. Babies that get adopted, right? Because she's also conflating foster care with adoption.
She is.
Right? But babies that get adopted, are they at a higher likelihood of the things she's listed? Right? Because she said slavery, she said abuse, she said, right? Like she said some really heavy things. That would be interesting because I don't know if, I understand there's issues with the foster care system, right? Yeah. But the foster care system isn't babies that get adopted. It's babies that, come from really rough households,
Yeah, I don't know the statistics on that either. I do know that they're making a lot of headway in the foster care system, especially if you can get in with Christian families. And so there's a lot of work, but there is a lot of conflation between what adoption is and the foster care, and I think they equate those
as the same thing.
As the same thing.
Yeah.
Before you come to me talking about pro-life,
we should kill the victims of molestation.
I think, what does this have to do with molestation?
You just mentioned people molesting children. We should kill the kids in foster care is what you said.
What I'm saying is in general, overall. If I don't want to have a baby, I should have the choice to.
Just don't have sex then. Just don't have sex.
That's not even logical.
It is.
It is. Who are you, Nancy?
I sound dumb.
You
sound dumb as okay.
It does, because even as teens, people explore. And it's like, as funny as you want to be, people should still have the choice.
So you went from saying that my outfit was really cute to saying I'm an effing idiot. That's so mean.
But I think that your point of view is very obstructed, and I think that you just don't understand.
She said her view is very obstructed.
Yeah.
Wow. This is insane.
Understand the magnitude of having a child.
Yeah, well, I'm not the one who admitted they would be okay with killing babies in foster care and killing children that have been abused.
That's not the point. What I'm saying.
That's really.
Oh my God.
So
wow.
She, proceeds to, she assaults this lady. And I think what it was that I think she was cornered and she realized how incoherent this is. And that's usually when you have these sorts of conversations, people discover their own incoherent worldview.
Right.
That none of that makes sense.
Right.
None of that makes sense. And so I think this is wrong, and I hope this lady gets charged. I understand the visceral reaction to this.
Yeah.
I think it's just, this is a reflection of where a lot of people are with their mentality around this.
Well, it's why we go in these circular arguments, because when you really get down to confronting pro-abortion arguments, they don't have much to say except their emotions and beliefs that as soon as you begin to unravel those, they get violent. They get, they start yelling. And so you never really come into a conversation about those. And so it's hard to have those conversations. We've seen that across the country, whether it's politics or whether it's life. And we're getting more and more difficult to actually have conversations and understanding other people's views.
Yeah, and this is this lady's apology, which again I'm still not sure if you can call it an apology, and I'm not sure why she isn't charged yet. But she says, to Savannah, I sincerely apologize, but cannot sit around and allow you to continue pushing this one-sided narrative. What? Anytime the word apology has the word but next to it, that's no longer an apology.
It never works for my wife and I.
Yeah, it doesn't work in a marriage, it doesn't work with your friends, doesn't work with your family. I understand hands being put on someone is never the answer, but throwing rocks and hiding hands is worse. So throwing rocks and hiding, I don't think she's meaning literally, is worse than physically assaulting someone. So cornering someone and showing the inconsistencies in their worldview is worse than putting hands on someone.
Yeah, just justifying violence.
Yeah. She knows the truth and she needs to release the footage in its entirety, which she has, by the way. Savannah is a professional antagonist, not a reporter, and the truth will be told.
Wow.
Yeah, I struggle with this because I don't think Savannah was unnecessarily antagonistic to her. It starts off pleasant and it slowly escalates the more she's pressed on her worldview.
I often, just ask people that, the pro-life movement, you hear from pro-abortionists, that we only care about saving the life of the baby. We don't care about the mom, which is untrue. You look at what pregnancy centers are doing, but you don't ever ask Planned Parenthood. There are over $2 billion in funding, and they walk into a Planned Parenthood and take the life of their child, and they walk out with the same issues that they had walking in. So I think if this woman wants to be mad about something, she should be mad about the fact that Planned Parenthood's only solution is taking the life of the child. Where are they at wanting to help a mom? If the same women that I mentioned earlier, that statistic, 76% of these moms who are heading to the abortion clinic, they're on their way, tell us they would prefer to parent. Where is the conversation about that with this woman? How about let's help moms? Let's care for them well. Taking the child's life is not the answer.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the fact that this is so accepted and so celebrated now seems like it's taken a darker turn. And I hope that at the very least, people can just have sober conversations about this. Acknowledge that that's a baby.
That's right.
Acknowledge what you're doing. And then acknowledge what is the better pathway forward. Right? Ultimately, if you aren't ready to have a baby, you shouldn't be having sex.
Right.
Like, I think that's basic, foundational common sense.
Do you think most people realize that there's a heartbeat at 6 weeks?
I think most people don't realize what's in there at all. Like, because this whole clump of cells nonsense, they don't understand what's in there at all. And so I've seen videos of women who take the pill for the abortion, right? And then the baby's flushed out. You're basically forcing a miscarriage.
Yes.
And then they're traumatized by what actually came out of them. Right. And so if you're married and you know anyone that's had a miscarriage, you would know how traumatizing that is. But these pills are forcing women to have miscarriages and then experience the same trauma that's totally unnecessary as someone who's having an actual miscarriage, which is extremely tragic.
Under COVID and the Biden administration, all the safety rims were lifted, all the mechanisms to help women make sure, at least when they were taking the abortion pill, it was under a doctor's care. Now they are literally ordering pills from around the world. They get them into their home, and no instructions. They have no idea what's about to come. And so women are going through horrific situations, aborting their child and seeing the child in their toilet. And so we get calls all the time of women who have the pills in hand and don't know what to do. Do I take both of them at the same time? And so that is one of the biggest issues. I don't know if you know that over 70, Guttmacher, which is Planned Parenthood's research arm, says 63% of all abortions now are chemical abortion. And I think it's probably higher than that. But so all the chemical abortion has become the method of which women now are aborting in their home by themselves and having to deal with the consequences of it.
And do you know the week cutoff for chemical abortion?
It's 10 weeks, but women have no idea where they're really at unless they've had a lab grade pregnancy test. Most of these women are guessing, and without any instructions, they have no idea how when the cutoff is. And so that's another major issue. We've had instances where women are taking these pills way past 10 weeks and end up in the hospital. The problem is the hospitals count them as miscarriages, and they're not actually, looking at that this was from a chemical abortion.
And the reality of a chemical abortion increases the dangers of it if you're further along. If you're past the 10 weeks, you can really have serious complications. Like what?
That's right. Well, I mean, we've seen in Louisiana up to death, but they're having all kinds of medical issues. They're bleeding and, severe cramping and ending up at the hospital.
So in Louisiana, there was a case of a woman who was having the pill for the chemical abortion. She was further along than the recommended 10 weeks because she didn't know. And she died?
She died, yeah. And it's been a while. I don't have that. It's been a while that there was a reported case.
Let me see if I can find it.
Remember that case, Ruslan?
Yeah, that was Georgia though.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how far along she was, but that was because of a chemical abortion too. Let me see. Was it in 2024 or was it earlier?
It may have been. I think it's probably 2020. Are you seeing it?
I'm seeing different
things.
Different things. So this is saying Louisiana miscarriage patient who had to cross state lines for critical care wants answers. Okay, so this person survived, it sounds like.
Maybe it was maybe I'm thinking of Georgia.
The Georgia one was Georgia. She got the chemical abortion pill. But I don't know how far along she was, and she ended up passing. Let me see. Yeah, so they're calling it a delayed abortion, but yeah, I don't remember how much time there was around that specifically. But they came out as in like this woman was denied health care in her home state.
Right.
Therefore, she had to go get this chemical abortion procedure. You could take those off now. Therefore, she had to go get this chemical abortion procedure, and then they blamed the delayed healthcare versus the incompetence of the doctors.
That's right.
Yeah, tragic situation, but my goodness, how do you blame the pro-life movement? Yeah. She was already going through the process of the miscarriage, and they should have provided care for her.
That's right. And we saw a lot of that after Roe v. Wade was overturned in Texas when the Heartbeat Act came in. Texas, which was a 6-week ban before Roe v. Wade, we saw a lot of those doctors refusing to treat women and blaming it on the Heartbeat Act, and then later on the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, and when I looked at the laws around these heartbeat laws and other laws that had very heavy restrictions, I feel like almost every one that I looked into in every state had caveats for women's health or women needing emergency care.
Yeah. None of those laws have changed since Roe v. Wade. A doctor, it's mispractice not to help a woman who needs a legitimate help. So none of those had changed. They were just using that, I think, to cause problems for the pro-life legislation that was being enacted.
Do you think these were incompetent doctors who were stupid, or do you think these were doctors who were activists intentionally not providing care to women who they could have legally provided care to at the expense and at trying to make an example of the pro-life movement?
Yeah, I don't know the doctors and all, but I think that's certainly possible.
Yeah. That's dark, man. Okay, so this issue is personal for you guys, right? And you explore this in your new book, Beauty from Ashes, where you share how you and your wife had an abortion early on in your relationship, and you grew up in a Christian home.
Right.
It was from your dad who kind of encouraged this. Tell us a bit about that story.
Well, my wife and I were engaged to be married. We fell in love very quickly, and unfortunately made a mistake, and we got pregnant during the engagement. We had about 6 months left to go before the wedding, and I grew up with my father. My parents were divorced, and I was very close to my dad. And so when this happened, he and I had always been able to talk about things, and so I went to him and told him what the situation was, and got terrible advice. I think he felt like it wasn't the way to start a marriage, and I think maybe because he had been divorced, he thought maybe this was going to create a situation that we might divorce, and so within a few days of finding out that we were pregnant, we found ourselves driving to Planned Parenthood in downtown Dallas.
How far along was your wife at the time?
She was about 3 months.
Oh wow, okay, so she's pretty far along.
Yeah.
And how long were you guys together?
We had been together 6 or 7 months at that point, from dating. Is that and we were planning the wedding. So we were driving down there talking about the wedding, thinking that we would never talk about this again, that we would just get it done quickly, that no one but me and her and my dad would know about it. We walked into the Planned Parenthood, and it was a horrific experience. And one of the things my wife told me about, which I couldn't believe. In fact, I've said to her, "Are you sure?" But after the abortion, the doctor came over, and she was in a lot of pain. She kind of goes into it in the book, kind of had this twisted smile and said, "Do you want to know the sex of your baby?"
Oh my gosh. Oh.
And that has haunted her for
goodness
32 years.
What did she say?
She said no.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, people that have experienced the abortionist, I mean, it's cold. You walk in, you just feel, I mean, you talked earlier about this spirit, it's demonic spirit. It's just so cold, and it was a terrible experience, obviously, for her, having to go through that, not knowing what to expect. We thought we would never talk about it again, and we didn't for 17 years. But that was the furthest thing from the truth. That has haunted us for our whole lives.
17 years. You guys went 17 years without talking about it.
We did.
Wow. Okay. In this moment, was there any conversation of, let's just move the wedding up, let's go to the courthouse, get married, and then we can still plan the wedding, and it's okay if she's 6 months pregnant? Did you talk about that? Was that an option with your dad? Was that a conversation you had with her?
No. I mean, and you would think, I think because there was so much shame in showing up to the wedding pregnant, it's so hard to believe that we didn't have those conversations now, that why those things wouldn't have been discussed. And if someone would have just said, "Hey, this is your baby. This is not a," and I actually do think that's, at least in the circles that I run in, that's really changed. I think the stigma of that has changed a lot in the last 30 years. And I think this is where the church has to do a better job. But when you look at the reasons why people abort, you go back, gosh, we took the life of our child because we didn't want to show up with a little bump.
Yeah, I think that has changed. I would agree with you. So in the early 2000s, tragically, one of my friends, he was dating his girlfriend in high school. Same situation happened. Family, you would think it was a Christian family, and it was his family that encouraged her to have the abortion. They then get married. They have 2 kids together, and they never worked through that and ended up getting divorced later. Yeah. Several years later, I think as the culture changed, so this is like 2009, 2010, another one of my best friends, he comes to the faith. He is a new Christian, gets his girlfriend pregnant. They were already kind of talking about like starting a life together. And they went the opposite route. They ended up getting married while she was pregnant and having the baby. And now he is in ministry. He's one of the most, one of the fastest growing churches in America. He just planted his own church, and they're doing amazing. Right. So I do think that there's been a change in I would say that maybe this is in the 90s that you guys went through this. So I think there's probably been a lot of like, hey, like people make mistakes, and we're going to make it right, and we're going to do everything we can to create a healthy environment for this child instead of killing it.
Yeah. Some churches have done a much better job about transparency. I think in the 90s, at least the churches that we went to, people tended to have a mask on, and you just acted like everything was okay. And I think there's been a shift towards understanding that, we're all broken and fall short, and it's okay to make a mistake. But it was something for my wife and I, and I'm so glad to hear those stories, because there's so many other stories of very few people who go through an abortion and stay married, that stay together. And we look back on those 17 years and saw such bitter roots of my wife, wondered if for many years, whether I would show up for her, whether she could trust me, whether during those hard decisions that I would love her. I remember reading a book by John Eldredge. You remember Wild at Heart? And one night after we'd become believers, I was reading that book, and it's like 1 a.m. I was finishing the book, and I'm just crying because he had talked about how every little girl wants to be beautiful in their father's eyes. And if you remember, she would put on a dress and she'd get up on a table and she'd, "Daddy, do you see me? Will you pursue me?" And that's the opposite of what we do as men when we come into this situation of an unexpected pregnancy. And so my wife for many years was wondering, do I see her? Will I pursue her? Will I love her when things are hard? And that was something that took a long time for us to get over.
Yeah. 17 years you guys didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
How did it come up?
Well, it's the reason I'm here as the president of Human Coalition. So our church, remember 2008 and 9, the recession, our church split. We went through a tsunami of things that we talk very openly about in the book. But our church split, and my wife was an ordained worship leader. I was the lay pastor. We helped start and build this church, and it split. And so we had felt like we'd lost our church family. So, and we were having, the business was going through lots of turmoil. And so we said, we better go to Christian counseling, or we felt like our marriage was really on the rocks. And so we closed the door to that office that first day. And Tricia began to cry like I'd never seen her before. And as we got underneath those tears and that pain, we realized that those were from the abortion at that point 17 years earlier. That same week, 2 of the co-founders of what is now Human Coalition, I had started doing consulting work for them. That same week, they handed me a card and said, "We save babies from abortion using the internet." And I said, "Oh, Lord, what are you doing?" And those 2 things came together, and it was the first time as a Christian father and husband that I saw the devastation of abortion and what it had caused my wife and I for those 17 years that we never talked about it. It was starting to come out. And then I saw this really, cool way of reaching women who are planning to abort and stepping in the gap and helping them at this time of crisis. And so I was just like, Lord, I want to learn more about that. And that began kind of my healing journey, and for us to be starting to talk about it. But I was intrigued because they were using science and data and technology, all the things that I'd use in business, but applying it towards saving lives.
So they were very innovative in terms of how they were approaching this topic.
Yeah. Just great business guys looking for solutions. When we first started, we were just going to be a lead generator. And at that time, 98% of the women who were already made a decision searching for an abortion, heading to the abortion clinic, 98% of those women were not coming in contact with pro-life, life-affirming centers. And so we went out to change that.
And it sounds like another aspect of what you guys are hoping to change, or just within this book, is this idea of the shame around carrying something like this for 17 years is worse than just confessing it and dealing with it.
That's right. Although we led church, we led from the front, we sat in the pews, our pastor didn't talk about the issue of life. And because of that, I believe we felt like it was the unforgivable sin. And so part of this book is to help people understand, both on the pro-abortion side, but also the pro-life side, and for pastors who are afraid to talk about this issue in their churches, to help them realize that almost 40% of the women in your pews and men have experienced abortion. And if we don't talk about this winsomely and gracefully, that there will be no healing. And like us, there are people in your pews that feel like it's the unforgivable sin, that it is. We look at situations like this where it becomes violent because there's so much out there about life. And so we want to help people understand this is a spiritual issue, and we need to fight this with spiritual resources and tools.
Yeah, I think, well, the flip side to all of it, in terms of it being a spiritual issue, is the incongruence of many people in church with this issue. So they may intrinsically know that that's a life in there, but out of convenience or out of whatever justification, they're okay with doing this privately, right? I've seen some data of a surprisingly high percentage of people that get abortions are evangelical Christians.
Yeah,
which is alarming to me. Yeah. In your case, you grew up Christian. Your dad, churchgoer. Did you guys ever have this conversation after the fact?
Oh, after we had with my father?
Well, I mean, just like in general, like now 17 years later, you're finally working through it. Yeah. You're dealing with it. You saw how much it caused strain on your marriage. Yeah. Did you ever like circle back with your dad and like, man, that was kind of some terrible advice you gave me?
Yeah. And before he passed, I mean, I started working for Human Coalition, and so they got to see that, and by God's grace, my whole family has become pro-life, and so they were obviously pro-choice. And my stepmother, her father growing up was a Baptist, one of the leading Baptist pastors in Dallas, and she grew up pro-choice. So it was a different era of time, but through our experience and sharing our experience with our family, they've become pro-life and very supportive. And then, when I started doing this work, one of our pastors, Matt Chandler, I don't know if you know the Village, and one day he was preaching a message on being fully known and fully loved by God. And my wife and I just wept through that sermon and felt convicted to tell our two oldest children, who were in 8th and 9th grade at that time.
Wow.
So we went home and talked about the hardest conversation I've ever had. We sat our two oldest children down, and we told them about our abortion and that they had an older sister, and her name was Sarah.
Did you guys end up finding out the sex?
We did. So when my wife, part of her healing journey was going through post-abortive healing, one called Surrender the Secret. And she went through, in the last day a pastor came in, and they ended up praying and asking the Lord to give her an idea if it was if it was a boy or girl, and her name. And she felt like the Lord told her name was Sarah.
What an interesting full circle moment when the abortion doctor asked if she wanted to know, right, with a weird grin on his face, and then in the process of her healing, getting some degree of personal revelation on what she, would have had.
And that meant a lot to us, naming her, giving her identity. And Sarah was my grandmother's name. But also as we began to pray and kind of research this, you think about Abraham and Sarah. She had an unexpected pregnancy. And Sarah means princess in Hebrew. And so God just took us on this journey of just remembering that we have 5 children, not 4. And in fact, as I was kind of preparing to come see you, I put together a letter that I felt like Sarah would have written to my wife and I. But I think it's also a letter for those moms and dads that are out there that have experienced abortion. I always want to say, in an audience of the size that's listening, there are many, many people that have gone through abortion. And I always want to remind them that there is no sin greater than the cross of Christ, and that it's not the unforgivable sin, and that God can redeem and take what was meant for evil, those ashes and those pieces that are broken up, that God would redeem that and use you in mighty ways. I don't know if you'd love me.
I would love you. Yeah.
This is from Sarah, our daughter. She says, "Dear Mom and Dad, I know I wasn't with you long, not in the way you hoped or dreamed. I don't know. But I want you to know I was never alone. From the moment my heart first fluttered in the secret place, I was wrapped in love, yours, his, always. You name me Sarah, princess. And that's exactly what I am. I walk now in a kingdom without pain in the presence of the King who knew my name before stars were born. He whispered it over me with joy. He told me about you. He said, you are loved more than you know. I don't carry pain, only peace. Not questions, only understanding. I don't see shame, I see courage. I don't see brokenness, I see the beginning of healing in you through me. I was not a mistake. My life, though short, was on purpose. You may sometimes wonder what could have been. I want you to know I am part of your story, a thread in your heart, a voice in your legacy. Your love for me is still active. It shapes how you love others, how you see life, and how you speak for those who cannot speak. I can't wait for the day that we will meet again. There will be no sorrow there, only joy of recognition in the fullness of time made whole. Until then, carry my name gently. Speak it when you need strength, and let my short life light a long path for others. I am yours. You are mine, and we are his. With all my love, Sarah.
Oof.
Yeah. There's 2 truths about abortion, and when you take the life of another human, when you take the life of your daughter or your son, there's never getting that back, and that pain will be with you. But as I mentioned, there's also no sin greater than the cross of Christ, and that we are forgiven, and there's healing. But that's, and that's even writing this book was cathartic and healing, even though it was difficult. Reliving some of those things, my wife and I going back and going through this journey and wishing we had made different decisions. And yet, seeing what God will do with your testimony, with your brokenness, with your past. And by God's grace, he's led me into this work. And that week that I met the other co-founders and started this work. Now over 32,000 children have been rescued from abortion.
Wow.
Hundreds of thousands of moms have been cared for and helped. And so that's God turning, beauty from ashes and using our testimonies. And so it's been a wild journey, but it's been an amazing one.
In terms of the church being silent on this, I know that even in evangelical circles, from the 60s and the 70s, they didn't really have a huge issue with this. And it seemed in some pockets, right? And it seems like that was probably anchored on ignorance. Mm-hmm. But the shift with the pro-life movement seems to have happened after the release of the silent scream, and the invention of the sonogram and the 4D sonograms, right? Which they still say is the highest way to discourage someone. Is like if they can see that that's a human in there.
Yeah.
So do you think there's like remnants of just this ignorance from 50 years ago before people understood what that was in there and they didn't have all the information, because it's just weird to think that there are churches that are either silent or quietly complicit in this.
Yeah, it's a great question. If someone was bombing first grade elementary schools across the country, and 100 children today in Vista were being killed, and another 200 in Dallas, and another 300 in San Diego. And at the end of the day, 2,500 children were lost. Do you think we as Americans, do you think we as Christians would be doing everything humanly possible?
Absolutely.
We would. And yet we lose 2,500 to 3,000 babies every day in the womb. And the church might speak about this once a year. And yet every day we're losing 2,500, 3,000 children that we don't see. So there are good churches that are doing that work, but it's still too few. About half the churches doctrinally are not even pro-life. And so we see a reluctance of pastors. We work in Chicago, and I was speaking to one of our supporters, pastors there, who he said, I am personally pro-life, but if I talk about this issue, I'll lose half of my congregation.
Wow.
And there's a lot of pastors that feel that way. They feel like it's political, and we don't want to politicize this. We'll just preach the gospel and everything else will be okay. And yet, as many women inside the church are aborting their children as outside of the church. So just because we accept Christ doesn't mean we're not aborting our children. And so if we're not teaching and educating our congregation, if we're not making this a priority, then we're going to lose another 2,500 children every day until the church rises up and says no more.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when we discuss the church, or I would say people within our own, whether that's church or whether that's conservatives, I think sometimes the issue I see is not a great alternative for what does life look like for the person that falls short and struggles and deals with issues and circumstances that may influence them, right? So I think we, within conservative circles, can do a great job of speaking out about what we're against without painting a version or a picture of what charity and hope looks like, right? And so I think within the context of the church and within the context of what you guys are doing with connecting people with resources, therein lies a lot of the solution. Is like there has to be an alternative than just this is wrong, right? Because I think on an intrinsic level, people know that this is wrong, yet it still happens within the church. So if the church paints a better vision of, hey, yes, this is wrong, yet there's hope. Yes, this is wrong, but you can still make it. Yes, this is wrong, but there's a family that I'd love to adopt.
That's right.
Not just your baby, but you potentially in certain situations. And I think that's where the vision aspect has to change.
Yes.
Right? That like, no, there are people and there are resources and there are means that are willing to step up and help.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I think that's why it's so important that churches prioritize this issue, because it's beyond just abortion. This is about what we're called to do as Christians, is to step in that gap and step in those hard places and be a part of that solution. It takes a village to raise a child. And we just had our first grandchild.
Congrats.
And my son just is transitioning out of the Army, and they came and they're going to live with us for a while. And gosh, you forget. I mean, it's every 3 hours you're feeding that baby. I mean, it's a lot of work, and it takes all of us to come together and be a part of that solution. And so you're right. And that's why, at Human Coalition that we looked at, we've curated over 10,000 organizations that are part of that solution, that we can provide, and understand exactly what her situation is. And it's why it's so powerful. When we reach these women, they have no idea that there's help, that there's people who are actually stand in the gap and be a part of this solution. We'll walk with you as long as you want to walk with us, and do amazing things for these moms, with these moms, to empower them to flourish. That's the picture as the body of Christ that we have to continue. It's not just don't have an abortion. It has to be, how are we all coming together to help?
Yeah. Just to go back for a moment, how did your kids react when you and your wife finally told them and they were in middle school?
It was an amazing moment. As hard as it was, they both were very affirming and loving. My daughter, who all of our kids are pro-life, but our two girls just took it as a mantle. And my oldest daughter started debating everybody online and in high school about life. She ultimately came to work in our call center at Human Coalition, and has 838 lives that she's helped rescue.
Wow.
Yeah. So what an amazing picture of God's grace. And she now works in our fundraising and is just passionate for life. And our youngest daughter, and this was a funny story, but in 8th grade, she was in debate, and they would let you this was a public school, debate about anything. Didn't matter what it was, except abortion. You could not talk about the life issue. And she went all the way up to the principal, finally got permission to do this. And she was working with her debate partner, because you got to take the opposite side. And so her debate partner, she did it in 7th grade and 8th grade, was Googling and found our testimony online.
Wow.
And he said, "Hey, I'm really sorry about your parents' story. I'm sorry that happened." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" Well, we had told the two oldest, but the two youngest,
oh no,
we never talked about it.
Wow.
We'd already kind of felt like we had talked about it. So we forgot to tell her. She was the youngest.
Oh no.
So she called me at work. She's like, "When you get home tonight, I want to talk."
How old is she at this point?
She was like, that was like 7th grade, I think, the first one. And I was like, "Am I in trouble?" And she said, "Well, we'll talk when you." Was like what I used to say to
That's
her.
the call she would get from you. Yeah,
She used to get from me.
Yeah.
And so I went home, and she goes, "Well, is there anything you want to tell me?" And I'm like, "No, what are you talking about?" And then she began to tell me that story. Yeah. But just so proud of them. And so God has, taken this, and I do, God will take our pain and use it for his glory. And it's just been amazing. And we hope that there's generational blessings from that. And but they were very gracious. God was graceful in that. So, but man, you tell them about looking your kids in the eye and tell them that you've taken the life of their sister. Now, I also found out she was upset with me for a long time, because she saw me as her protector and my mom and her mom's protector, and those things didn't coincide with how she saw me, and that I didn't protect her mom through that situation. And so through high school, she was upset with me about that, and then we came back and were able to talk through that.
Wow.
Yeah.
you choose to sin, can't choose the consequence.
That's right.
You know,
that's right.
So that you're thinking that this is reconciled and everything is good here, but yet your youngest didn't know, and then she finds out, and it creates some friction.
Yeah.
You know, I want to talk about some of the current kind of opposition to abortion. You know, you even hear some Christians say stuff like, well, Ronald Reagan or Donald Trump today is pro-life with these caveats, which is usually rape, incest, and the mother's health.
Yeah.
What would your response be to those kind of three issues?
Well, I'm pro-life, and I'm pure pro-life. And so, obviously less than 1% of all abortion comes from, it's like 0.5% comes from rape and incest. And those are, horrific situations that is very difficult. But that's less than 1% of all abortions. I will say I have met survivors of that their mother chose life, that were a product of rape. And they're some of the most amazing, loving people. And so their life matters too. And so two crimes don't make a right.
That's right.
And so I think we want to be sensitive to that. But again, if we could eliminate 99.9% of all abortions, then that would be something, obviously people could talk about. I believe that all life is valuable from the moment of conception.
What about the mother's health? And oftentimes they talk about, what is it? Ectopic pregnancies? Am I saying the wrong word?
Ectopic
Pregnancies, yeah.
Listen, this is where, a doctor should, and this is not abortion, when a doctor's job is to save the life of the mother and the baby, and if the baby's life cannot be saved through that process, then that is not abortion. And so that's how doctors should care for a mom, is to save both lives and to look at how we best do that. And obviously a mom has that choice. And we've had moms that have gone through cancer screening and understand that, their life may be in jeopardy, and they make that decision. But when a doctor is looking to save both lives and the baby's life is lost, that's not abortion. And so I think there's some confusion about that.
Yeah. What about the pushback that, hey, this is a woman's issue. Why are you two dudes sitting around talking about this thing that primarily affects women?
Yeah. Well, it takes two to make a baby. And a child is half her mother's chromosomes and half the father's chromosomes, and is a new independent child of their own. And so it takes, man and woman. And so we're all in this. I would say if men would step up, 88% of all abortions are single women. So 88% of abortions are from single women, right? So it's a huge issue that men are not stepping in, because like my wife, if I would have stepped in the gap for her and said, hey, this is our child, we can do this, she would have never made that decision to abort her child. And so I do think this is a man's issue as much. And when we support women and we care for them and we don't get into these situations in the first place, would be the ideal way. But it's important that men step up and are part of the solution.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I even think that the majority of pro-life activists are women.
Yes.
So that's interesting.
No doubt.
Yeah. And then those women who are friends of mine, friends like Lila Rose, always tell me, hey, we need your voice.
Yeah.
We need you to keep speaking up. So I think that's interesting. I also think it's interesting that as a man, you technically don't have rights to your own reproductive process, right? So a man could get a woman pregnant, and that woman can have an abortion without him having any legal input in that, which is tragic. And there's videos of guys outside of the clinic begging their girlfriends not to have abortions.
Oh, yeah. We've had police officers that have called and their wife is wanting to abort. And he says, I have sworn an oath to serve and protect, and I can't even protect my own child. He has no rights in that. Yeah, it's tragic.
Yeah, and I remember reading a study, and this data is limited, unfortunately, because no one's going to pay to get these studies made. But I remember reading a study that most women who were victims of sexual assault and get pregnant end up keeping the baby, right? And then I read a different study that a high percentage of women who have had abortions said that usually there was a man that was the biggest influence towards them getting an abortion, either the father, the dad, or the doctor.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And when I don't know the exact stat, but it's 80%. I mean, it's high when a man comes in with a woman and sees the sonogram, hears that heartbeat, and they will choose life, and that mom's going to, most 9 out of 10 times will go along and choose life when you have that supportive of a father or husband, another man. They will choose life.
Yeah. I think that's why the sonograms matter so much, right? Just being able to see what's in there and hear the heartbeat and all that. I mean, that's
a heartbeat
huge.
is powerful.
Yeah.
When you hear that, when you hear a heartbeat, it is powerful. It's one of the best things that you can hear.
Yeah. Some of the pushback to this is from the other side, right? So we talked a lot about the left and the crazy paradigms, but then there's folks within conservative Christian circles. They're called the abolitionist movement, and they push back against the pro-life organizations because they think that you guys don't go far enough. In their paradigm, they want to make abortion illegal as quickly as possible, but they also want to make it a criminal offense against the doctor and against the mother. And so they've kind of pushed back and made the pro-life movement be too soft and not hard enough on this issue. What would be your response, and how has your engagement been with folks from that side of the aisle?
Our response is that we believe the woman is a victim in this, and that she deserves to be loved and cared for. And the way to change hearts and minds is through love. That's how Christ changed the world, is through love. And so we're not going to, we're really not going to legislate this. We have to care for these moms who are in very difficult circumstances. So we don't believe in that a woman should be prosecuted through this. We believe that the abortionist and the people in the businesses that are sending in the pills should be the ones that are going after and criminalized and penalized for this. So that would be our stance on that. We want to help protect women. We want to love them and care for them. They're in very difficult circumstances. We haven't had great. The abolitionists seem to be very. What's the right word? Difficult. They will try to stop legislation, anything even incremental. And we believe that if we can save one life today and not wait 10 years to save any lives at all, that we're going to do that all day long. So we'll look at incremental legislation, ways to save babies today, in the hopes that we will ultimately end abortion. But they take a very strong stance and really come against a lot of the work that good pro-life groups are trying to do.
I think it sounds like the goal of both is to outlaw all abortion.
Yes.
It sounds like you guys are saying, hey, we're trying to be more pragmatic here, and we understand that we need to chip away at this little by little by little. And yes, the objective is all out, ban of this, but we have to take the wins that we can get right now.
That's right, and love people through this difficult circumstance.
Yeah. If I had to steel man their position, would there ever be a time you would be okay with a woman getting charged for this?
I don't think so. I mean, personally, I wouldn't. I think women are in very difficult circumstances, and it's not something I think that we should even be considering at this point. I think we should be helping moms, changing hearts and minds by loving them and caring for them. I think we need to go after the abortionists who know better, who are the ones that are actually taking the life, those that are manufacturing and distributing the pill. That's where to go.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
What would you say with someone that would say, well, if a woman's had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 abortions and she knows what she's doing, are we kind of taking the autonomy away from women by just kind of saying they're all victims in this process? Because I would agree with you. I would say the vast majority of folks just are ignorant. They don't know what they're doing. There's a cultural spirit that has completely robbed them of, I think, their consciousness in this situation. But wouldn't kind of generalizing all of them as not knowing, doesn't that kind of take their own personal choice and responsibility away in this?
Yeah, it's still, just like going after leaving the 99 and going after the one. I still think that woman, why is she aborting a child that many times? I haven't, that's got to be a very rare circumstance. So I wouldn't look at our how we go about ending abortion because of some extenuating circumstance.
Got you. That makes sense. Yeah, that community is very fascinating to me because they seem to be very angry with you guys.
They seem very angry. It's been kind of like the lady here. I don't know why they're so angry. But we all need to work together. And I have been encouraged when I first came into the pro-life movement, being a business guy, coming in this with just fresh eyes and coming in really just to, say, how could we help? There's been a lot of division. There's been a lot of territorialism in the pro-life movement.
Really?
Yeah. Huh. And a lot of that's fear, and a lot of, it's a big, a lot of people with different ideas and on ways to go about this. But we've been working with 10 of the top pro-life groups in the country. Live Action's one of those that I know, Lila, but coming together and building trust and building relationship. And that's been huge. So I've been really encouraged that there's a lot of good work, and we're starting to work more and more together. There's no one group that's going to end abortion. Abortion is a huge issue. It goes into lots of different areas, poverty and all the different things that we talked about today. And so, so I think there's some really good work. And we'll take every incremental law to save another baby today, care for moms, change hearts and minds that way. Ultimately, we've got to make our vision is to make abortion unthinkable, the same way that we think about human slavery today, right? It could exist in pockets, but no one thinks it's acceptable that there's human slavery and unnecessary. Now, a lot of people will go, well, nobody thinks it's unnecessary except the mom who's aborting her child. She thinks it's necessary. So how do we, as a movement, help her make it unnecessary? And that comes in by helping her care for her. And that's where most women are. Again, 76% of moms will say they prefer to parent. So that to me shows that we're winning. We just we have to continue to do more.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is on the education side. It seems like
it sure is.
Education, dialogue, being willing to take a hard stance at the expense of losing status. I've had quite a few people in my personal life like sit me down and think that I'm this like far right raging activist for simply taking a pro-life stance.
Right.
And I'm just like, you guys don't know what the far right really is if you think taking a pro-life stance is far right. And I've had like relational fallout from this,
Well, it goes back to what you kind of started, one of your questions, like, why is protecting life a radical stance? Where has that ever become? And again, it comes back to this. If it was a 2-year-old,
right,
and it was getting, beat to death in their front lawn, do we think we'd go, oh, well, I don't want to tell that mom what to do with that child. We would go protect that child. And yet children in the womb, we see that somehow differently. And somehow we're radical because we believe that life in the womb should be valued and protected. Now, they believe it too if it's their child and they want it.
Right.
It's only not valuable if it's unwanted.
Yeah. It makes sense within the broader framework of not just postmodernism, but even the idea of, there's no biological sexes, and you could be whatever you want to be. And so it's like that thing inside of you can be a child, it can be a clump of cells, it can be whatever you want it to be. I think it's all connected.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm grateful for you guys. I've been partnering with you guys for a while. You guys were generous enough to sponsor our Bless God Summit, which was totally unexpected. I was like, wait, who wants to? What? I already partner with them. This is great.
Our whole team loves you.
Yeah, no, I love what you guys are doing. How can they get more information about the book, and how can they get more information about Human Coalition, and specifically how they can partner with you guys?
Yeah, well, humancoalition.org. Check out our website. The book, Beauty from Ashes, book.org, I believe, is the website for that. But you can find it on our Human Coalition website as well. And so we would love for folks to join us in helping save the next baby, care for the next mom, helping us to change the world by loving these moms through difficult circumstances.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. And like I said, guys, I have been partnering with Human Coalition. I think they're one of the best organizations in terms of this sort of work. So check them out. Consider partnering with them. Consider saving some babies. All right. And Jeff, thank you so much for coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right. We're out of here, guys. Peace.
Peace.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Please be sure to comment below and subscribe and all that good stuff. And check out this other video that YouTube seems to be recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right. I'll see you over there. Peace.